All right. Welcome everyone to Textually Explicit Malware and Middleware in Motion. So in this talk, we're going to explore how DNS text records, which is kind of a boring corner of the internet a little bit, it does hide some cool insights, software dependencies, malware command and control stuff, silly misconfigurations. So we're going to talk today about how curiosity and free tools can uncover stuff that even like expensive enterprise scanners can miss sometimes. So we're going to keep it light on tools. We're going to keep it hands-on. We're going to make sure you have stuff you can replicate basically from anywhere. So think of this kind of like a field guide, quick recipes, patterns to recognize, pivots to try out. So this is going to meet you where you stand. If you're a hobbyist, you're going to learn some pretty simple tricks to explore the internet's back of house without like any pricey tools. If you're like a pen tester, security engineer, it's a very nice refresher on text hints at dependencies. You can validate stuff, you can monitor, things that you can use to strengthen phishing lures even. Our malware researchers, you're going to see some examples of command and control, kind of exfiltration over text records, ways to detect that stuff, ways to decode that stuff. Your goal through this, I think, where to look, what to save, how to pivot when we're talking about text records. I am Alex Ronquillo. I come from a mix of different disciplines, manufacturing, risk, compliance, esports, game theory. I landed in security for the past 6 years because, well, really, I was raised by the internet. I have a lot of fun sleuthing in the direction of protecting it. In my day job, I get to run the product and revenue teams at WhoisXML API. So I get to talk to a lot of cool, very authoritative people about how DNS abuse works, using open source intelligence, talk a lot about like legal domain takedowns, lots of little nooks and crannies in attacker and defender stuff we get to play around with. So my part of this workshop is largely kind of like a tinkerer's curiosity. Much more of that than any like formal research dogma. So we're going to keep this rolling. A few other things you should not expect to be in this workshop. We are not teaching 0 days. We don't have any elite tradecraft for you. We don't have any all-in-one tools. I don't have any magic buttons. But do have some practical recipes, I think, for discovery. What we will be going over, first 3 sections of this agenda, I'll be taking us through. It's going to be a lot of stuff around DNS text, how it's used in middleware, kind of some tastes of malicious behavior. For the second half, my best bud, Ed Gibbs, will help take us the rest of the way through. He'll be talking a lot about kind of malware, C2 techniques, that kind of thing. Each of us has challenges for you. Let's detail that a little bit more. So there's going to be a couple levels of difficulty to the challenges. Level 1 challenges will be super easy. Think kind of just like Control F find type stuff. You probably need about 3 megabytes of disk space and a way to get to our GitHub, essentially, to do level 1. The level 2 challenges are going to be a little bit more involved, a lot more rewarding for sure, especially if you are able to kind of collect, store, and query like a higher volume of DNS records. But even with just like basic terminal commands, you can have some fun in level 2. So first, text records. Let's do a little primer. Text records used for a lot of things. Email verification, domain ownership verification, sometimes just kind of storing values and hashes. As we'll see today, apparently also just so you can write whatever you want for any reason. The DNS itself is just so inherently fast, lightweight, distributed, non-invasive. It's typically a lot easier to add like a DNS text record to a domain than it is for that same domain owner to say like integrate a software's like API or something like that. Especially if the whole point is just like prove that the domain is theirs, right? Or maybe just like authorize some sort of like single sign-on federation, something like that. As the major email services have thus commanded of us, SPF DKIM hygiene super necessary, and it also happens to sit in text records to a pretty great detail, oftentimes. Now, unfortunately, for all of these same reasons, it also doubles as like a pretty good command channel for malware, data exfiltration, kind of supporting command execution and kind of general attacker badness, right? So if you're doing, let's say, a single DNS text record query, right? Very easy to do. You can do a lot more than one pretty often. Every operating system has some sort of built-in DNS client that's super easy to access. You see some example commands here. When you start running a lot of DNS queries, right? How many DNS queries, by the way, is reasonable to run? I've seen DNS providers, big recursors, sell kind of like software that does DNS filtering, and a lot of times those corporate user seats are kind of budgeted for like 5,000-ish DNS queries per corporate seat per day. So, I mean, it's not insane at all that a single machine might be doing around 5,000 DNS queries per day, just doing regular business-to-business enterprise stuff, right? But if a single device is generating like tens of thousands of DNS queries like per minute, yeah, that could be suspicious. That starts to get, kind of trending towards possibly even like DDoS territory, right? But if you just say had a list of Fortune 500 domains, you just wanted to collect 500 DNS text records, well, even if you're on your home ISP, a hotel Wi-Fi, something like that, you're probably not going to get rate limited or blocked or anything like that. Again, it's not a tremendous volume, 500 DNS text requests. Now, if you're thinking of running 5 million, right? Well, I mean, in general, be a good netizen, right? One thing to note is that a lot of vulnerability scanners already do a lot of like massive subdomain enumeration, oftentimes very quickly. They could be hammering a specific domain for tens of thousands of subdomains, all very quickly, just to see if any domains exist, right? Now, if you're pulling text records, you're probably not enumerating potential domains, but you might still be running at a volume where you might want to look into tools like mass DNS or kind of running a local recursor with like bind, unbound, power DNS, different stuff like that. And in such cases, look into parallelization, moving work across kind of asynchronous workers. Lot to learn in that category. You certainly won't need to run millions of text records for this workshop specifically, right? But in the cases where you are pulling a lot of bulk DNS text records, generally speaking, data about something right now is cool, but ongoing historical monitoring of how that thing changes is even cooler, right? In terms of that something, one of the important questions here is what is it that you're looking at, like in terms of target domain names, let's say. One thing we see is a lot of the subdomains that come from like passive DNS derived sources. Wow, a lot of those are actually just wildcard subdomains that don't even exist. If you ask for any subdomain underneath that like apex domain, it would just respond if you throw anything at it, right? So what that means is what target domain you're looking at is super important because depending on what the target is, right, it could even just be kind of placeholder noise, right, which can throw you off when you're looking for some real gold, right? So if you're doing a lot of DNS requests, you're doing them over time, smart to keep the whole responses pretty much, normalize them probably, and definitely keep paying attention to DNS configurations, particularly like SPF, DKIM, time to live values, things like that. Software verification strings sometimes even provide like UUID style strings to their customers. And you may eventually run into digital DNS, basically text graffiti. Have some examples for us in a sec. As far as how you store all this data, I mean, you can honestly get pretty far, like vibe coding things to aggregate into like big JSON or CSV files. It starts to get bigger than that. You might want to grab like SQLite or maybe look at actual serious data lake management stuff if you're getting large enough. One bonus, though, other than load balancing, you may notice differences in DNS answers, depending on where you ask the question from. So if you catch those differences, a lot of times those could cue to kind of interesting cases, right? So in prep for this workshop, we've done a fair bit of collecting DNS text records. We have a lot of prefetched records to share with you. We're going to dig through some of those now, and we're going to get started with some odd text records that we found. So I've tried to think of super good, plausible reasons as to why you would need a GitHub hosted exe that has a version specific of Rustdesk, which is a remote access tool. I mean, there's certainly good malicious reasons related to like command and control and maybe gaining access to a system that you might not be invited to, right? Another exe just below that to something that may or may not be an academic software called Math Partner. But this is from a Swiss domain name that only contains numbers in the domain name. So who knows? Probably totally cool, right? Even though maths is plural here and it's not in the proper software name. At the bottom, got a kind of Kaspersky looking type of squat domain. And this text record really wants you to open your local Windows notepad, right? All of these odd, speaking of accessing systems you're not invited to, some of these text records suggest that you basically sudo yourself to death. And make sure that you don't leave a note about it, apparently. Others here suggest that you bash and wget things that you probably don't want to bash or wget, right? And in other cases, they're just saying, hey, why don't we just SSH, right? India News 24, which I haven't looked into this myself, but that's something I might name a domain if I wanted to hide C2 traffic and make sure like a SOC analyst doesn't really look twice about it, right? But this has a text record for an SSH server. That SSH server is still responding as of this morning. Very weird, right? Uncharacteristic for sure of like a news website. Also, probably uncharacteristic of Dr. Dennis Berman's domain to have a text record that also wants to SSH to some kind of FTP. I doubt the doctor is aware of this. But hey, at least we don't have like plain text passwords in DNS text record. Oh, okay. Actually, oops. Yes. So there's a couple domains we've seen here that seem to announce passwords in their text records. In one case, even a user plus pass, fairly concerning. Now, just because it's there doesn't necessarily mean it's real or that the credentials work or, if it could even just be for the lols. Someone put this here. But it does seem like this, is potentially kind of like hiding a spare key conveniently, just taping it to your front door, right? We also see kind of unpaired API keys, just passwords that are only passwords, which could range from like much less concerning to just completely benign. More oddities with DNS text strings, starting with echo, right? And in most of these cases, very similarly wanting to do something with your host file, right? So these exact strings are on a network of dozens of Punycode domains that all kind of point and have similar text configs. Most of these look to be registered in Colombia and China, but they also use some kind of new generic top levels like .sail, for instance, right? One thing we find a lot when we dig into these kind of, let's call them networks of domains that have like a very similar footprint and seem to obfuscate the name against the other name, so you can't really pair them together otherwise. Usually we find like a meaningful percentage of these are already known indicators of compromise and they're flagged all over VirusTotal, stuff like that. But at the same time, it doesn't matter how many security tools, threat feeds we throw at these kind of things, we never see that 100% of the related domains in larger campaigns, like 30 plus domains, we usually don't see that the full campaign was caught by any thread feed tooling, that sort of thing, right? So, unfortunately, diversifying the domains you use in these kind of infrastructure attack, things like that, still brutally effective. Sometimes it's not super malicious. Sometimes we just get like sweet little notes from domain admins in their text records, from notes from the domain admins to like the Internet Archive, sort of please don't scan me, please don't index me, all the way through like Netifly, like kind of letters to Netifly's brand protection team. Even complaints about how making text records in the first place is necessary, and suspicion as to why you are reading their text records, right? Pretty much anywhere you can put crawlable text these days is also an opportunity to troll LLM crawlers. So you can see some examples here of very wholesome and altruistic robot positive behavior, from injecting requests for like 256 gigabytes of pseudo random data to requesting like base64 encoded API and SSH keys, right? Even just a music fan wanting to make sure their favorite lyricist is heard, right? Another thing that inevitably happens when you can put free text somewhere and somewhere people can see it, it becomes a bathroom wall, right? So you get professions of love toward a Devon Jade Trucker with confirmation of like a birth date, country, state, city, very specific as to who this person is, right? You get to some conspiracy tags, you get some personal beefs being hashed out, all the way to encouraging Bible quotes. So where can you find text records that you might already have, right? Well, right off the bat, most DNS calls are not text record specific, right? Primarily, you're going to see A records, quad A, name server calls, mail server calls, things like that. For corporate folk, check your seams for DNS logs. For home labs, I mean, you could Wireshark, you could TCP dump. You might be surprised at what's already passing through your home network without notice. Bonus points if you see kind of your smart TVs or like IoT devices being a little chatty. You might even find their update servers, right? So let's get into finding middleware, right? So we're going to talk a whole lot right now about domain verification via DNS text records. Like this one mechanic is going to do so much heavy lifting right now. So text domain verifications, right? Basically, software out there wants to have you prove that you own a domain. So they'll give you some kind of secret code. You're going to add that code to your DNS as a text record. Within generally 3 days to a couple weeks, the vendor says, hey, we're going to go look it up, right? And if it's there, the string we were hoping was going to be there, right, then you're verified, right? Most software says, hey, you can remove it at that point. But you probably never remove it. Statistically, most don't. So now anyone can see what services you use, right? And we're going to get into in depth here a lot of the different services you can find. Really, though, this kind of method of verifying your domain by putting like a broadcasting like a text record, for blue teams, consider this kind of like potential vulnerabilities that you're sort of broadcasting publicly, right? In my eyes, at least, I think it's best to remove the text strings that you don't need to keep there persistently, and kind of use your DNS text as a map to chase current and maybe past shadow IT, right? It's a little bit like how the privacy-minded tend to see the stickers on the back of the vans that tell people like the names of their kids, how many kids they are, what school they go to, a lot of stuff that could be exploited with the wrong intent, right? On the red team side, yeah, I use these broadcasted vulnerabilities basically to map out software dependencies, save them for potential 0 days later. A little bit rare, but it is a useful way to find software users. Also, very useful way to create kind of delicious spear phishing lures, right? Because if they verify that people at that domain are used to seeing a particular SaaS around, right? Your phishing lures may be more effective that way. So while again, I think in my opinion, you could strip the text records once you verify the services. The majority of services we studied for this seem to be good with you removing them. Some services like Blue Sky's domain verification, it seems, spec in that you need to keep that persistent. Because if you don't, then you might suddenly end up with an unverified Blue Sky handle, which for corporate consumer businesses is going to kind of irritate your marketing, kind of social media teams. You're going to create a bunch of tickets to work potentially, right? Now, some services again explicitly mentioned in the documentation you can remove it once it's verified. A lot of times, though, it's kind of unclear, right? Kind of like what McShankshanks has found. So, some different types of software and users of different services you can find. Palo Alto Networks. They do have identity federation services that ask you to verify your domain with the text record, right? So think like cloud managed identity federation, essentially. But what you can learn here, they have an identity stack, and it's it's via or through Palo Alto. You're not going to figure out the specific hardware or tier of their subscription or anything like that. This is real nice because you can see essentially what companies are using what types of software. Very useful when you're thinking like third-party risk or kind of larger market studies, that sort of thing, right? But as I mentioned earlier, if it's blue teams and it's red teams, and you're kind of securing this, it's more about inventorying the signals you're putting out there, and theoretically what software should be running, right? So you can see a few examples for each of these. We'll provide kind of a few example domains that you can find in our challenge CSV, as well as an example of the text string that you might look up to find people with this configuration. So texts for ego structure, when you come across these, ego structure is software from Schneider Electric. It's very heavily used in kind of like distributed edge sites, a lot of critical infrastructure places. Think like IoT, SCADA controllers, things like that. A lot of that stuff can be managed inside of this SaaS, right? There were some CVEs announced for Schneider-related software recently, not exactly this particular software that's authenticated with this record, right? So, these text strings won't perfectly confirm any specific CVE is exploitable, right? But, when you can see that, large domains like E+, Fastenal, which again makes sense given their presence in kind of manufacturing, right? As you see these different things, you get more clear ideas of what software is running, other phishing lures you could put together. Let's look at more of these. Vulnerability scanners. This is actually very common that vulnerability scanners will ask their customers to add something in their text record, right? In this case, Fortidast, that's their app security testing service. Pretty interesting here. It seems like they actually provide unique user IDs in some way. Either that's to the domain assets, possibly just for like the customer profile. It's worth looking into. For defenders, that's kind of inside an assurance of coverage that certain assets are regularly scanned. For attackers, yeah, it's like a map of which domains likely have apps to attack, right? And also who uses a very specific Fortinet product to do so. Remote access tools, right? A LogMeIn verification code might reveal that that enterprise uses remote access tooling, right? Now, it could also mean that they just use different LogMeIn services. They also own GoToMeeting, some other things as well, right? Again, though, in the realm of software dependencies, discoveries, finding remote access tools and people who use them, right, may not even be within everyone's risk tolerance necessarily. But you can see some interesting examples here, right? Netflix, Pacific Life, even a Texas government website, all with LogMeIn verified. Speaking of logging into things, the larger password managers also do domain verification. Again, another pretty good way to open up good phishing lures. A spear phishing email to a company sales rep or something from like a well-hidden subdomain under like a dynamic DNS service. It's probably already very effective, even more so when you can kind of programmatically enrich like your targets with validation of specific software that you can lure. So on the big corporate conference floors this year, a lot of hype actually around this AI governance, among other AI things. Grandview Research says this like security segment of products is probably going to be over $1 billion soon. And DNS Text records say various companies who have cloud-based LLMs verified for integrations. If you look for enough of these, you will probably run into eventually companies that have LLMs integrated. They may be sub-processing personal data, and they may not be stating so in their data privacy policies or sub-processor lists, right? So that may be some AI to govern. Okay, so let's do our first challenge. So for your first challenge, this is a scavenger hunt. It is a super easy scavenger hunt. This is like bunny slope level stuff. It's basically Control F finding text in larger text. So it is a good bit of text to review, though. This is like almost 10,000 records in a CSV. But that's it. It's only 3 megabytes. So within that 3 megabytes is a lot of interesting text records from Fortune 500 domains, mixed with some kind of handpicked favorites from our research team from passive and kind of active DNS queries. So all you have to do is grab the CSV that we prepared for you in the GitHub link at the bottom here. You can view it in any CSV reader, whether that's Terminal or even like Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets, even if that's all you have, right? So let's kick over to the hunt and some context to get you going. Your goal is to find the target domains here. And to find the target domains, you're going to have to use the description of the target org, which will tell you a little bit about the type of organization that is that owns the domain in question. And the context details why the text record of the domain is interesting, right? And the text value hint is a very nice shortcut hint. So you can kind of determine what string you might want to search the CSV to find, right? So for each target domain you find, you'll end up getting some amount of points for it. More points equals more interesting findings, right? So kind of in the spirit of the workshop, the conference, if you get all of these correct, the bounty points add up to a possible score of 1,023. So grab that CSV and have fun. We will post the answers to the level 1 challenge in our DEATHCON Discord channel. Feel free to ask us any questions there live as well. Ed and myself will do our best to answer live. We'll also upload the scavenger hunt answers to the target domains to our GitHub as well right after this DEATHCON weekend. From here, I'll pass it over to Ed Gibbs to talk to us about malware in motion.
Thank you, Alex, and welcome, everyone. We're going to primarily use DNS text records today as a reconnaissance tool in the malware detector and a way to unmask interesting and also sloppy configurations. Everything shown in this presentation is authorized as research and testing, not for harmful misuse or otherwise. And illegal content. I'm Ed Gibbs. I'll be presenting the material today. My background spans research, development, engineering, and large-scale DNS infrastructure. Some of the companies I've worked for in the past include Cisco, Symantec, McAfee, Nokia, Checkpoint, and Lockheed. Plus, some startups that really don't exist anymore. They were either acquired or they show up in past incident reports. So anyway, contact details and links are on the slide. Let's get practical. DNS text records are kind of like the cargo van of the protocol. Everyone uses it to haul miscellaneous items, stuff it with information, use it for SPF or DCAM, perhaps vendor beacons, marketing tags, and sometimes command control. That flexibility creates noise and as well as opportunity. If you normalize it, hash it, give it up, you can mine a lot of signals with very little effort. Attackers sometimes hide in plain sight using escape sequences inside text records. You'll see backslash numbers with .be or strange spacing designed to defeat naive parsers. It's not strong obfuscation, but it's just enough to slip through some past brittle string matching and poorly written regular expressions. Some of the red flags include excessive escaping of printing printable characters, mixtures of octal and decimal escapes in the same string, or some really odd white space like non-breaking spaces where regular spaces should be. You'll also see needless space encodings or inconsistent casing. These are all pivots. Collect them, normalize them, and group by behavior. Some of the modern tools often decode escape sequences properly, but in the real world, you'll still find broken validators, fragile scrapers, mail pipelines, and misparse edge cases. That gap is where detection and offensive recon can both win. However, determining what's legitimate versus suspicious comes down really to a talent. While most systems are prepared for it, there remains a lot of security stacks that simply are not ready to deal with it. When you see backslash, for example, 194 followed by backslash 160, that's what we call a byte sequence. X2C to a 0. In other words, a non-breaking space from the text, right? So treat it like white space during normalization, or your SPF logic may choke. Decode escape sequences first, collapse white space, then reparse. And as you can see in this example here, there are a lot of escape characters used in the various text strings here to evade detection. So here's another perfect example of a complex encoded text record. So let's look at this. K-365.ru. Absolutely nothing suspicious about that domain name at all, right? But look at how it's encoded. This is one of the larger ones I was able to find in a massive corpus of DNS records, text records specifically. And we can see here that I attempted to break a lot of this down using the command line here with the utilities that were available as part of the Linux system that I installed. And you can see here that it's kind of interesting to look at, but we can see here there's a vanity URL on it, or not URL, but at the end of the encoded strings, we can see 95E. So typically, that's a marking to whoever put this together that's their encoding. So just why would people do this? Why does this appear in DNS records, right? And it's because people copy from rich text editors sometimes, and content management systems picks up the escape characters, but they look like ordinary spaces on the screen. But they can break validators that expect, for example, plain ask. So if you're troubleshooting mail or security pipelines, again, normalize these characters early. This is kind of a more complex talk here, but the pattern backslash, for example, 194 backslash 160, or it maps to basically hex C to a 0. That's a non-breaking space. Knowing that helps you distinguish this mapping and looks for, perhaps intentional bugs and helps you clean the data before analysis. A typical workflow when practicing a statement is to first pull the DNS text records, or if you have a corpus of text records available to you, you like to be able to code them. And again, code those escape sequences, normalize the white space, lowercase and collapse to a single line, perhaps, hash the result for clustering, because those hashes, again, will often appear in other text records. If it's part of the same threat actor, perhaps, or they use it for identifying domains in that cluster. Then pivot on name servers a lot of times, because those name servers include chains and some of the IP cohorts. This is simple enough to run on a laptop with really no commercial tooling at this point. Here's several commands that basically decode mixed escape sequences and replaces the encoded characters appropriately. Once you normalize text records, you can pivot to name servers. You can look for outliers like expected .argu authorities, perhaps behind a Microsoft Exchange online service. You can enumerate who else uses those same name servers, then compare the SPF and include chains to find related infrastructure. This is also a great way to identify what domain names are using Microsoft Exchange, for example. Another one that we like to look at, a lot of CVEs behind that in the past, Anchor. WordPress, we got you there. What's really interesting is what could possibly go wrong with this statement in the middle here. It's basically going in wget and hiding the output, right? And why somebody would put that in a text record, no idea. This should never appear in a text record, ever. But what can we conclude from this love statement? We would love your feedback to know if that's malicious. What's the intent behind this, right? Why would somebody set this up? So when we normalize every text record, we do it at scale and we hash the result. These large cohorts that share an identical hash usually point to the same control panel. For example, the same service provider or a turnkey kit. In our crawl, we observed more than 2,265 domains sharing a normalized text hash behind, or many behind, the .argu name service. So, yeah, I highlighted one here called StephenWayne.com. And I have to wonder if he knows he's been hacked. Because StephenWayne.com, when I looked up, is not in Russian, but obviously some .argu name servers there. So look for those strong pivot points for clustering, and very often you might use them for takedowns. On this one, it was also interesting that you'll notice that any signatures matched up 1F2 at the end of the hash. So whatever that is. This is an interesting find. Another pivot is SPV forward entries, or SPF. Extract the sending addresses from the normalized text, then count who shares them. You'll find some very large cohorts often indicate affiliate spam, neglected share infrastructure, or compromised mail delays. In our study, there were over 114,000 domains shared the same SPF record. So it's one way of doing it and easily identifying clusters. Then we look at combining signals, right? Intersect those text hash cohorts, shared name servers, and SPF include chains. And what will emerge is a family photo of brand adjacent domains, or what we call them kit-based phishing in staging zones. This helps red teams craft realistic pretext, and helps blue teams scope takedowns faster. To sanity check the encoder, start with a friendly string like The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, confirming your handling of escapes and white spaces once it behaves on the example pointed at live data. In this case, we can see a lot of them here. And I highly doubt ExxonMobil, for any reason whatsoever, would be using the .xyz domain. And it's also recently created. So don't know what the intent is here, other than they may rely on the browser or some browsers. Just looking at account.dan.exxonmobil and not showing the TLD perhaps as a way of persuading somebody to click on that ultimately. Here's some examples of Raytheon. It's a theme cluster with mimics this well-known brand without using the exact name. It shares the same text hash, the same name servers, and the same SPI chain. It's basically a very, very classic Kit signature. Technique first, target second. The method generalizes to a sector. When we look at insurance, a lot of victims of insurance fraud, right, in this domain space. So across the insurance-themed domains, we find thousands of suspicious records. They use the same mail path with the same text content, which made clustering this very easy. There isn't just detection, it's a roadmap for remediation across a whole industry segment. If you want to reduce this, grab the training materials referenced on the slide. Your homework is to write a small script that removes both octal and decimal escape sequences, normalize the white space, and then hunts for interesting IP addresses across the set. Bonus points for clustering by normalized text hash and pivoting on name servers. The link is on the slide. Grab your favorite snacks and get into some vibe coding. It's a lot of fun. A few things for the red and blue teams to take away from all this. For the blue teams, normalize the text before you do any analytics. Be prepared to create pivots and look for ways to cluster and associate. For the red team, find associations and relationships between records, text, those hash clustering, which can be very, very effective. We do have a set of suggested resources here in no particular order. Depending on what your favorites are, give them all a shot. See what you like to use. Number 10, Dave Dennis, look up DNS Viz. Those are all free, as well as some of the others here. So if you have a subscription to the first 3 or 4, those are great. Amass is also a wonderful tool. So, whatever you're most comfortable with, there's a lot of options out there to explore. And thank you. Appreciate your time.